I become the person that tries to activate the voice within to be louder than the noise around you.
This episode is brought to you by Skillshare, inspiring discovery through creativity. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Hardwood Rod Podcast, where we talk about your craft and the culture. This week, I have the privilege of having Sam Thiara join the podcast as we discover the extraordinary in the ordinary and how he found his ancestral roots through a faded photograph in India. We're going to be discussing some of the obstacles, some of his core elements, and being present. That and much more. Stay locked in. All right. Well, we are starting off new week on the podcast, and I'm excited to jump on and, I have a special guest today. And, after watching some of his TED videos, I had to really kind of dive in and see, a little bit about his story. And, I think, with some of the topics that we'll be discussing here, I think we'll not only, find a little bit about ourselves, but, what some of the stuff we'll discover as far as, the everyday, right? And how it's actually not just ordinary, but extraordinary, correct? And, Sam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me here today, and it's a great honor to be on your podcast. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Sam. And, as a speaker, educator, and a storyteller, I want to get to know you a little bit. And at the same time, I want to get to know myself as well as the audience. So, take it away, Sam, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, Rod, there are 5 things that guide and direct me in life: servant leadership, story sharing, activator igniter, champion enabler, and community do-gooder. So those are 5 things that just really lays down my foundation. And I think what was really clear for me is the fact that, we go through life and we can share what we do or what we want to do, but very rarely do we really understand who we are. And I think the time when I was probably around 35, I started questioning who I was as opposed to what. And it was amazing how the clarity came forward with regards to better understanding and appreciating what my journey was. Prior to it, it was just a regular standard journey of, primary school, high school, went to university, struggled with getting my first job because, again, I was so focused on what I wanted to do. My first job after graduating was 86 rejection letters from employers who basically said, we don't have a job for you. And then my first job was being a janitor, mopping floors and emptying rubbish bins with a university degree, but pulling life lessons in the sense that 3 lessons that actually carries me to who I am today. And the first lesson was my father said, I don't care what you do, you just do the best job possible, which is what I did. And it really started honing in on that character piece. The second piece was that I was ignored at times because you're a janitor. And, oftentimes janitors may not be seen as anybody of significance in the organization. So I know what it feels like to be ignored. So I make sure to talk to everybody because everybody has a story to share. And the third valuable lesson is all about this idea of, in any given situation, we all have lessons that are provided to us. And only when you start taking these lessons and understanding that these are lessons that are provided to you, does the clarity happen. And those things have carried me to what I now describe as an amazing ride, where I've been able to do 2 TEDx's. I've got a couple of books out. I teach at university. I speak and ultimately share. I mentor and coach. I've had about 5,000 conversations with people to help them in their journey to ideally activate the voice within to be louder than the noise around them. And a lot of what that is better to understand who you are so that then you can move forward to what you want to do. In a way, I guess that's how I would describe it.
Yeah, and I totally can relate to that. I've getting out and graduating back in 2012. I'm still like not sure of what exactly what I want to do. I'm still working my part-time job, and I'm still not where I want to be. And it took me a couple of years to finally kind of understand what I wanted to do, but more importantly, like you mentioned, who I wanted to be, right? Who I was.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And I think the way that the clarity happens is I call it the five core elements. What are the five things that are important in your life that you are not willing to compromise? And I've shared my five. And it's like you build this foundation, and any opportunity that now emerges, you now compare it against those five. And I tell you, when it hits 5 out of 5, it's fulfillment, it's purpose, as opposed to just going out and doing things. That's where I think we really need to take the time to find those five critical pieces that make up our foundation. And the way that you do that is by asking yourself, what were the courses I did in school that I liked or disliked, but asking yourself why. If you're working, what is it that the jobs that you've worked, what did you like about those jobs? What do you not like about the jobs, and why? What do you do in your spare time and social time? Why? So, as long as you are inquisitive and you're reflecting on those pieces, you start honing in on those words that start to resonate. And one thing that people are fearful of is, what if I don't pick the right words? And I always say, you pick the words, and as you go through life, your words can easily change as you change. So don't be afraid to explore those words and change them as you go through life.
No, yeah, totally. And it's just a lot of it. I'm just, as you're going, and telling me a little bit about your story, I'm just revisiting back, back in class, and trying to see, is this the right major? Because at first, in the beginning, you kind of feel like you're pressured, right? It's almost like, okay, so what are you gonna be? What's your major? And then I kind of, at the time, I felt pressured, like pressure to, I have to become something, So I just chose business as a major, and come to think of it, the business side of anything I hate, and that's just not who I was. And I came to realize that, 4 or 5 years later, and I call that wasted time, because because of the pressure.
Now, but the thing I would say is it's never a waste of time because you still learn. Like in my class, I'll have
True, true.
engineering students, and they come up and they're like, yeah, I want to do business, but you know what? I just wasted 2 years of my life in engineering. And I said, but did you learn in
Mhm.
engineering and the process? And they're like, well, yeah. And I said, well, all of this is going to be so valuable when you move forward in life, because all of these are life experiences, and you never cast them aside as a waste of time. It's all, again, part and parcel of the pieces that make up your foundation and who you are.
No, yeah, you're actually correct on that. It's actually a learning curve in part of your life that you actually got to, where, to the point that you want eventually will get. So that's something where, to this day, I always look, what if, but, you know, I'm actually glad to where I'm at right now, because there's actually a direction and a clear North Star. Now it's very clear. It's not foggy.
Well, and one of my favorite sayings is, obstacles are the necessary bricks on a road to success. People will fear the obstacles or setbacks. I embrace them because, again, it's the mindset you go in that you need to have setbacks in order to learn from them, to make you stronger and realize, is this the right pathway or not? If it is the right pathway, you're now that much wiser and you're going to attack it again. If it's not the right pathway, you've now learned from it and you said, okay, this is not the way I thought it was going to be. And then you go in a different, you pivot and you go in a different trajectory. But obstacles are the necessary bricks on a road to success.
Yeah, and what was the aha moment for you, Sam? What was that moment where you actually, it clicked for you? Do you remember that clearly?
Yeah, I think it was when I was around 35 years old and I was in a corporate setting and a corporate job on that trajectory that just common sense made, everything was common sense. But then I looked at it going like, but is this what I want to be doing for the rest of my life? And I was like, no. And then I started saying, okay, but what is it that I want? And when I started asking myself, what is it that I want? I started saying, okay, taking that inventory, and that's where the five core elements piece came up, is taking this inventory of what are the things that are important to me. And then once I got that, it started to make sense, because then I started looking at, it's almost like you reach a pinnacle point and then you start looking around going, but okay, what matches the 5 out of 5? And then I wound up within that company getting a job that hit 5 out of 5. And it was like, oh my gosh, I'm having so much fun and enjoying this position, to the point where my manager said, Sam, you're going to have to curb some of your enthusiasm of being in this job, because some of the people around here don't like their job, and they were in a different department. And yeah, they may not appreciate how much you're enjoying yourself. But it's a great place to be.
Yes, here's a question that I want to ask you, because to this day I don't know who told me this, but it just stuck to me to this day. So, every time, for example, I just think back at that one job that I hated, but I was there for 2 years. But there's three things that if you want to move on to another job, say, or leave the job, there's three things that need to be checked off, right? So there's one, does it make you happy, right? The second one is, does it help you advance your career? And the last one is, obviously, does it pay well, right? So if those three things don't check off, then that's something maybe you should maybe move on, right? But if those things do check off, you're in a good place.
Well, and one thing I would say is that last point about the money. What I always say is, uh, money is not a motivator. Money is a result of your motivation. In other words, if you're doing stuff that resonates, you're going to naturally be really good at it, and people are going to gravitate towards you because
Yes.
of the fact that it makes sense. And they're going to pay you good money for this because it makes sense. And I think oftentimes we have it backwards, where we're chasing the dollars in the sense that once I get comfortable, then maybe I'll, do other things.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, I see a lot of unhappy people who aren't really interested in what they do, because they've spent so much time just, again, finding that level of comfort. And I always say, comfort is what society wants us to have. Comfort is where we should be. This is what our parents have told us, what uh, we strive towards. But there is a danger of comfort. Comfort is where we stop growing as an individual. And
Yeah.
again,
Hmm.
some people that, if they love, uh, the corporate life standard 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, there's nothing wrong with that, if that's what resonates with you. But somebody like me, that's just going to eat away at me, and I can't do that.
Yeah.
So I just want to be clear that I'm not saying that if you are doing corporate, that's a bad thing. No, I mean, hey, if you like that 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and that satisfies you, and you're being paid well and compensated well, and that gives you the time to then dedicate to your other things that you want to do in life, that's all the best to you on that one. And it doesn't mean it's right or wrong.
No, totally agree on that point. And I'm not either of 9 to 5 as far as, sit on a desk all day. But ironically, sometimes my passion is kind of, telling stories. So sometimes I do have to sit down or stand and, edit some stuff. But that's a whole different subject. Wanted to learn something new? Well, you gotta check out Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes for creative and curious people on topics including illustration, design, photography, video, and much more. On Skillshare, millions of members come together to find inspiration and take the next step in their creative journey. Get 12 months of Skillshare Premium for 30% off. Explore your creativity with thousands of classes. Sign up now, link in the show notes. On the topic of opportunity, let's talk about a little notion that you brought up, that you mentioned on one of your presentations about opportunity knocks, and you have the Doorstop. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Oh, sure. So it's interesting, because what happens is we go through life in autopilot, and we do the ordinary, or we see things and it's ordinary. I go through life with a very curious nature, and that's what my first TEDx speech was on storytelling, is discovering the extraordinary in the ordinary. And the analogy that I use is, for example, a simple doorstop, wooden wedge doorstop that's there. And I just remember at the university I teach at, I was walking towards the building and the door was propped open with this wooden wedge. And I just stopped and I started looking at it. And this is where I came up with this concept, or in my TEDx speech, of what I call carpe. Carpe, which is like carpe diem, which is seize the day, but carpe is how I build my stories. And here's an example of that doorstop becoming extraordinary. So the C stands for curiosity. In other words, as I'm walking towards the building, I see this doorstop and I stop. There's something about it that just the curiosity piece stops me. A stands for appreciation. I appreciate the doorstop, for more than what it's doing. There's something of significance here. And the only way to find the significance is through the R, which is reflection. In other words, I'm standing there reflecting on this doorstop, and then I start applying what I call my P, which is perspectives, of my perspectives of life experiences and things that add significance and meaning towards what I've done so far, which is the curiosity, the appreciation, the reflection. And the perspectives, suddenly it dawned on me while I'm standing there looking at this doorstop, that people in our lives become these doorstops. Because we always say, when opportunity knocks, you go through the door, or, do whatever you can to get through that door. But then I thought to myself, the people around us who become the doorstops, who hold the door open for us so that we can then progress forward. And it just provided that perspective that that doorstop is very reflective of some of the people that have helped us in our life, that we should be acknowledging and recognizing. The E at Carpe stands for experience. In other words, if you don't capture this whole aspect and story, your story dies an untimely death. So this whole process that I go through is how I discover the extraordinary in the ordinary, and how a doorstop becomes extraordinary, how a puzzle piece, and I've given about 5,000 pieces of those, is a way that it's connected people together. Or a hourglass is very reflective of time, but it's also very reflective of life in general. So that's how I am able to take the ordinary items or ordinary experiences and just look at it through a different lens and make it extraordinary.
Yeah, I love that. Just a great way of looking at like the big picture, but at the same time, looking at the small things, the little details. Because yourself and I we kind of are similar in a lot of ways, where I can visualize something that's a lot of people wouldn't even recognize and use it. It could be for anything. I could use it for an idea that I have down the line, or something that I could use as some sort of pillar for something, right? So like the concept that you have, as far as the carpe, it's like seize the day. I look at every day as a page in my book, right? I see every day as okay, what am I gonna do here where I know it's time is ticking down, right? So I have to write down here stuff, because then my book is gonna be empty. There's stuff here I have to take advantage of the day. So with curiosity, appreciation, reflection, perspective, you get experience, and with that, at the end of the day, experience matters. And what are your thoughts on, as far as because I'm a firm believer there is no such thing as luck, because I feel like if you give yourself that opportunity, you create your own luck. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I personally would agree with that. I think luck may be 5%, and 95% are just the circumstances that have brought you where you are.
Maybe created, yeah.
Yeah, the example I'll give you is after I left the corporate job, I had a severance package because I took a buyout from the company. They needed people to leave. Everybody told me you made the biggest mistake of your life because you left everything that was just common sense of comfort for the unknown. And I just remember about a month and a half later, because I had a good severance package, I started looking around, and Vancouver in British Columbia in 2010 hosted the Winter Olympics. Well, in 2002, I wound up thinking, oh, I think I want to work on the bid to get the games to Vancouver. And I went to the website on a Wednesday, and closing date, I saw a job, closing date was Friday. I applied, and 3 interviews later, here I am working on one of the largest projects that has hit Canada, and thinking to myself, luck was going in on Wednesday, closing date Friday. That's the 5% that was the luck.
Yeah.
But the 95% of it was all the work I had done to that point to earn the opportunity to get those interviews, and the hard work in the trenches that you've done. That's what's going to get you there. Um, just today, for example, I had a student send a note to me because I was a reference for them to get into our business school. And she was thanking me, saying, "Oh, I really appreciate the reference, and oh, you really came to bat for me, and this and that." And my reply back was, "No, you did the heavy lifting. I just reinforced the obvious. So the success belongs to you, not to me. So, I appreciate that you are thanking me, but remember, you're the one who did all the heavy lifting here, not me."
Yeah. No, that's totally true, and that's something where I always take every opportunity I could get. If there's a lot of time where I rarely say no, and if it's something that's gonna benefit me, even if it's something small, or you never know, because down the line, you never know, and just kind of touching base on, when you're working with some of your students, what's some of the kind of questions that they ask you, most often as far as, their careers?
Yeah. Again, I teach a course in organizational behavior. So a lot of it is business psychology, but a huge component of the class, which I incorporate, is trying to have them understand who they are, and then supporting and guiding and mentoring them. Even after they finish my class, I said, just because we're done with the semester and the term doesn't mean that it's over. If you want to stay connected, I'm happy to be here and support you. And it's been about 5,000 conversations to date that I've had with
Yeah.
individuals to help them in life and career, and they've gone on, like those who have graduated. I mean, yesterday one of them was on television on a cake bake-off. Like, she's a master like cake designer, and she does phenomenal things. But that's somebody I mentored and it wasn't, again, me saying, "Oh, this is something you should do," but just being present to ask them those questions. And, she's literally like my family now. And the fact that she was just on TV yesterday was just so heartwarming. But again, she's really earned everything. And having those conversations, just being present and being a champion and enabler, because I always say there's enough noise out there, people telling you what to do. I become the person that tries to activate the voice within to be louder than the noise around you.
Yeah, a lot of the times, especially when we're young, right? We have all these noises, whether it be friends, family, that could pretty much affect your decision, and you kind of, your self-esteem, right? You're not confident, right? And I feel like if you're confident at an early age, oh man, you're ahead of the game, man. If you know exactly what you want to do in your early 20s, you are ahead of the game, like by far.
And that's where I really try to work with them to get them to feel the confidence of moving forward by knowing who they are, so then they can go in the direction. And yeah, like activating the voice within to be louder than the noise around. And even I've been subject to it with regards to, for example, I went in search of my ancestral roots in India with just a faded photograph. And all these people
Wow.
saying, yeah, all these people were saying, you're not going to do it. If you find it, you're not going to get a good reception. And it was interesting because it wasn't a lot of support for, yeah, go find this village. How can I help you and all that? And all I had was this faded photograph. And it, the thing is, I was born in England, raised in Canada. My parents come from Fiji. So my grandfather left the village probably around 1905, and we were disconnected from the village for all of those period of time. And
Oh, okay.
yeah, and I was a, it literally was being a foreigner going to a land that shouldn't be foreign to me. But I wanted to do this, and I went with this faded photograph. And, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack, but not knowing where the haystack was.
Yeah.
And people saying, oh, you can't do this, or what's the point, or why do you even need to go search for your ancestral roots? But it was really important to reconnect with our past. And in the process, it was also about discovering my own identity of a a British born Canadian with parents from Fiji. Like, really, who am I? Because people ask, what part of India are you from? And I always have to struggle with, well, I wasn't born there, but, but my parents, they come from Fiji, and people say, well, are you even Indian? So it was really interesting about that identity piece, but just the fact that through persistence and overcoming obstacles, I actually did find my grandfather's house just with that faded photograph and very little information. And it's
Wow,
an epic journey.
congratulations.
Yeah, it's an epic journey that was euphoric. And at the same time, I think we got to tell ourselves, like, there's a lot of noise, but that voice inside should guide and direct you where you need to go. But you find those champions and enablers that are going to be there to help you. So I wrote it into a book. It's called Lost and Found: Seeking the Past and Finding Myself. And it's just a book, not just a wonderful story about discovering India for the first time, but it's also a book about, how to overcome the noise and about discovering your identity.
Wow, that's an amazing story in itself. And just how long did it take you from, getting to India and actually finding, was it a whole, like, a process, or was it kind of throughout the years?
Actually, it was a process that probably took about a year from where I said, okay, I had never been to India, and I said, okay, I'm going to start thinking about going to India. But then I had to do a lot of prep work. Okay, so get your shots and try to learn as much as you can about the place before you get there. And it took about a year for me to pull some of the research, talk to people, gather whatever I could. And it wasn't a lot of information, and was able to get a faded photograph. And that was how I got there. And even in the book, I write about how there were setbacks. I mean, I went to to the wrong village. We thought it was this village, but it wasn't even right. The next day, we went to this one center part of a particular town 5 miles away. We just said, you know what, let's just ask people. And then, it just was a bit of a journey, but just the fact that you don't give up and you keep going. But even if I wouldn't have found my village, I would have still come away knowing who I was better than when I was before going to India, because it was about that identity piece. And, there's a platter in Indian cooking, which we call a thali, and it's a metal platter with segmented dishes. And that's what my life was before India. I was British, Canadian, Indian, Fijian. But by going to India, I became what I call khichdi, which is this rice dish, which is a blend of flavors. I guess the equivalent would be like making an omelet, where you throw things together and it
Yeah.
becomes a beautiful meal, which khichdi is a rice dish, but it's a blend of flavors. And it allowed me to accept all of my background as opposed to segmenting, which I used to do.
No, yeah, you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs, and that's part of the process. And what's one thing that really stood out? Like, if you could say, what's one thing that you found about yourself during that journey?
Yeah. Well, it just the fact that I went in search of my, Indian roots, but my realization was I was always Indian. I didn't have to go to India to discover my Indian roots, but it may help me to realize that I was Indian. And the other part was I I was persistent, and I really wanted to do this, that I actually took Ziploc bags with me. And when I actually found my grandfather's house, I went into the fields across from the house and I scooped up dirt and I brought it home to my family because nobody in my family had ever been there and
Nice.
needed to, just so that they have a connection back to India and where, my father's father left in 1905. Uh, so it was actually, like I said, an epic tale that you might see in a movie, which actually played out in my own life.
Yeah, that sounds like something that I could definitely see on the big screen, in some sort. It's a it's a story within a story. If it's if you kind of put it all together. Now with that, right? Why, or how would I put this? How would you now, let's say, if somebody else was, looking for the ancestors, or just a family member, what's an advice that you would give them as far as like some of the things you learned?
Yeah, part of what I would share with them is the fact of, try to find the people that are going to support the journey. And, there may be very little information, but there's a lot of databases, ancestry sites that you could go to, or countries where they keep records. And it's a lot of this digging and researching that you may have to do yourself. But the idea is to also find people that are there to support you, not to sway you away from the search that you want, but also be prepared that you may not be able to uncover it, but if there are small components, even if you can make it to, let's say, the district where your ancestors come from, or maybe the town that they're from, even if you can't find the house or the specific, celebrate that moment that you've actually gotten to that far and celebrate that as a victory. But
Yes.
yeah, I mean that
Good advice.
yeah, it doesn't have to be that as specific as landing or eventually finding my grandfather's house, but just whatever matters to you, and accept that you actually went on the search. The search is uh, the one of the most important parts. The final destination, if you actually find it, is amazing, but just the
The
fact that you went
journey.
on search, the journey is the most important part.
Yeah, that resonates with everyone, because every time I talk to somebody, we always discuss about the journey and how that's the ultimate treasure, right? Not the treasure you're looking for is actually the journey.
Yes. Yeah.
And I feel like that's it's just amazing how you were able to to achieve that. And we always got to celebrate the small wins too, and that's a good piece of advice as well. And I was wrapping up here, Sam. Tell the audience, how do you leave a lasting impression?
Right. Yeah. Well, my favorite quote is, everyone's life is an autobiography. Make yours worth reading. And it's a challenge to us to always remember that we are living stories, and capturing them through that carpe principle I talked about earlier is an important piece, because that becomes your legacy piece, or things that people may remember you by. But always just sort of remembering that you are building your own personal autobiography. Many people don't think that their autobiography is worth reading. I would argue and say, if it's important to you, it's an autobiography worth reading. And you just need to capture it and to hold on to it and celebrate that it is your autobiography.
Yes, that's the same way I kind of live by, and I think everybody has a story, and it's worth sharing too. So, Sam, thank you so much for stopping by. And before we leave, where can people find you as far as all your those presentations, social media?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram and Twitter. If you're going to be posting some of the linkages, then that works. You can also, I've got about 170 blog posts that I've written about life and career on my personal website, which is www.sam-thiara.com. So you can catch me there. So I'm pretty well available. If people wanted to read up, and I've got 2 TEDx's that they can also chime in on. And yeah, I'm around.
Yes, I definitely recommend checking out his website and some of his TED videos. They're very, I guarantee you'll learn something new. So, and that's kind of the goal here on the podcast is, learn something new. So Sam, thank you so much for stopping by the podcast. I learned so much, and I enjoyed your conversation. I look forward to me bring you on again.
Thank you, Rod. I think we have so much to share and to talk about, but it's been a real delight.
Thanks, Sam. Thank you, and we'll see you on the next one. All right, guys. See you guys. And don't forget to subscribe and check out the latest episodes on the website. Follow us on social media at Hardwood Rod. And don't forget, every Tuesday we got the latest and greatest. So stay locked in. Would you like to be on the podcast? Got something to talk about? Make sure to head over to the website at hardwoodrod.com. Leave your name and the topic you'd like to discuss, and I'll add you to the calendar.